Welcome back to the Shed. Tonight we're going to take a break from our Hugo and Nebula award-winning Shed ladder, where I've been ranking all those wonderful novels, and I want to take a look at the sequel, the second of the final architecture novels by Adrian Tchaikovsky's In the Eyes of the Void. So when I reviewed Shards of Earth, I mentioned that I'd taken a bit of a hiatus from reading modern science fiction space operas, and I was pleasantly surprised by Adrian's writing. So what I would like to do today, similar to what we did with the Shards of Earth, is provide a bit of a plot overview, talk to what I liked, what I didn't like, I'll make some recommendations, and then we'll give this one a ranking. So being a sequel to the first novel, there may be some spoilers if you have yet to read Shards of Earth. So I say proceed with caution. I'll do my best to minimize that, but you may want to have a look at the first video just to get a bit of a refresher, because I'll be making references to some of the things that we learnt in the first novel here. So the book begins with Shards of Earth finished. We have the crew of the Vulture God, this salvage vessel, which is crewed by this wonderful misfit of different crew members. And they're now working for the Parthenon. And these Parthenon are vat-born sort of clones. They're all female race that are sort of the saviors of humanity they see themselves at. So they're working for this Parthenon because Idris is one of the main protagonists and one of the crewmates of this Vulture God, has got some very interesting capabilities. He's an intermediary, and what we learned through the first novel is that these intermediaries have had their minds sort of mangled up in a way that they can navigate this unspace. And this unspace requires them to travel through these really dark and bizarre unspace reality, and there seems to be something sinister lurking there, that whoever travels through unspace becomes really depressed and suicidal and just terrible place to be. But these intermediaries have got this special ability, because they've been manipulated somehow, to be able to deal with the consequences of going through this unspace. So Idris is working with the Parthenon because they want to build their own intermediary project to be able to build their own vat-cloned individuals who can do this work without sacrificing a whole lot of humans in the process, because it's a very dangerous sort of experiment that they perform on these people, and not everyone survives. Actually, very few survive. So the crew of the Vulture God are seen as deserters from the Hugh, and the Hugh, H-U-G-H, are this conglomerate of humanity. So they're sort of seeing the Vulture God as deserters, and traitors in many ways, because they feel that these Parthenon are a threat to humanity and they shouldn't really be there. On the other hand, we have the Hugh, the main protagonist, being this investigator called Javier. And he's heard about this cube, this data cube that's gone missing, that has some very interesting information, some information at least, that could cause war. So he's trying to figure out exactly where this cube is, this data cube, so he can get his hands on it and find out exactly what the contents are, to see what he needs to do to allow the Hugh to succumb whatever threat may be in whatever's revealed. Because we have all sorts of alien species and human colonies, the colonials and these Parthenons, all trying to get a hand on this thing. So there's some quite interesting information in there that some people are doing their very utter best to keep a secret. On the other hand, we still have this prevalent threat in these architects, these moon-sized aliens that are just deconstructing whole planets at the molecular level, turning them into what appears to be art. So that constant threat is still there, and we really have the crew being torn apart, the crew of the Vulture God, that is, being torn apart and split apart as you'd expect in a second novel. You know, so the novel really sort of follows that setup, conflict and resolution. So this novel has all those qualities in the second novel, but it really is building around that conflict. And what we find is that the human colonies and these Parthenons are all on the verge of war, and instead of trying to come united to combat this ever-present threat of the architects that we learned in the first novel, bit of a spoiler if you haven't read the first novel, that these architects seem to be manipulated themselves into performing these acts. And we don't know quite why that is, but we know there is something behind them, and they're not necessarily the villains that they appear to be in the first novel. So what we find in these growing tensions between the colonies and the Parthenons and other sects of humanity is that these alien species also trying to get revenge on these architects. So what we also learned in the first novels is that these architects are swayed away by certain artifacts. So there's this talk of originators, these beings that have been forgotten through time, who have got relics all throughout the galaxy, and when in possession of one of these relics, the architects will not attack your world. But what we find is that that is no longer a working trick. So the architects have sort of thought, yeah, we don't want no more of this, and they've started to actually attack worlds with these originator artifacts in there. So instead of humanity coming together as a single front to overcome this threat with the architects, there's a whole lot of infighting, not just amongst the human colonies and these different sects, but also the different actual alien beings as well. So they were trying to get to an understanding of this unspace to put an end to this threat. And the only person that sort of really seems to be able to do anything in this is one of the original intermediaries in Idris. So he gets taken to this remote world where there's this still existing and not in ruins originator site. So Idris gets this wonderful opportunity to delve a little bit deeper into Unspace, find out what this presence is in Unspace, and ultimately decide. And really the fate of the galaxy is again in Idris's very reluctant hands. So I found this to be a pretty interesting sequel, one that has definitely whet my appetite to see this trilogy come to a conclusion. So what is it that I particularly liked? Look, I really enjoyed Adrian Tchaikovsky's writing. What I enjoyed in this sequel is that it's been at least 3 or 4 months since I read Shards of Earth. How time flies. So I didn't even watch my review video to sort of get a bit of a refresher, which is one of the reasons I started this channel in the first place. So I didn't watch my refresher video. I went straight into the novel. And what I really liked about this particular one is that we didn't get a whole lot of information dump in the first couple of chapters like you sometimes do see in these large works of, trilogies, right? So I really enjoyed the way Adrian gave us a bit of a backstory when he introduced a new setting or a new character, or reintroduced a character into the setting, and he just gave us a sentence or two just to refreshen our memories. And I found that to be very effective. Straight away when he introduced one of these characters, I thought, hang on, who was this guy again? Oh yeah. And just by a couple of little sentences, it was enough to refreshen my memory and give me good insights to be able to enjoy this one. And what I found, it was really interesting, and I'd love to hear your thoughts if you happen to jump straight to the Eyes of the Void as opposed to Shards of Earth if you started with the second novel, because I'd say that this is probably one of those novels that he gave you enough background that you probably could come in and start reading it from the second novel. Look, I have no experience in that. I'm not quite sure how effective it would be, but just to emphasize that I think he's done a really good job of refreshing your memory, giving you enough context to enjoy this one almost cold. So the other thing that I enjoyed, right, this is like a 576 page book, right? It's a pretty chunky old novel. And like I mentioned, sometimes these middle novels, sometimes from my experience with some of these large space operas, can be a little bit slow going. But what I enjoyed about this is that he's got several different mysteries happening in this novel that I think is enough to keep you excited and keep you reading. We still have the mystery of the architects. Why are these architects doing what they're doing? We have the additional mystery now of what is actually driving these masters of these architects. Who are they? What do they want? Do they actually even exist? We also have the mystery around the originators. Who are they and what are they and where are they? We also have the mystery of Ash. He's one of the aliens who first made Earthlings aware of the architects. And for me, there's also this underlying mystery around Ash. Who is he? Is he really the beneficiary of man, or is he some kind of threat as well? So he's got multiple mysteries in here that I still thoroughly enjoyed, and I thought added to my enjoyment of the overall novel. The other thing that I enjoyed are the characters. Now, I remember when I made my review of Shards of Earth that I said that even though I enjoyed the characters, I found the characters to be a little bit trope, right? They were very, what you would get in one of those B-grade movies. And I remember I made a comment of, very good B-grade movie, but it just felt like your typical science fiction tropes. You could almost see these characters on screen. Now, one of the things I enjoyed about this novel is it didn't feel quite as bad. Not that it was a big negative for me in the first novel, but I felt because we knew the characters a little bit better, there was some of the backstory about the characters that I felt really sort of funneled them into this trope of science fiction. I actually found the characters this time around quite enjoyable. I mean, they didn't go through any huge character arc, and I'd have to argue that we really didn't learn much more about them either, but I just found them to be a little bit more enjoyable than I did the first time round. Look, that could be familiarity and we're getting to know and understand these characters and we started to like them a little bit more, but I would take that away from my first read as well. Yeah, the characters, there's still very much tropes of science fiction, like the reluctant hero, the badass in Ollie, some of these really strange alien creatures that all tend to act like humans anyway. I made that criticism of many novels in the past. This is no different, but they are pretty interesting characters, these aliens, and definitely very interesting looking aliens and their worldviews, right? So yeah, I did enjoy the characters. I think they were, for me, a little bit more enjoyable than the first time round, but they are still definitely tropes. The other comment I would make is, you know, I mentioned in the past, big space operas like this always have some kind of fight scene or battle in space happening. And sometimes they just drag on a little bit too much for me. And I made a comment through Shards of Earth that I thought the pacing was really good. That I didn't find that those battle scenes sort of dragged on to a point where I just gloss over them because I'm not really too interested. I want to see progression in the plot. I would have to say that this one's, the battle scenes were just a little tad stretched out at times. I thought they did come about more frequently than they did in the first novel. I'm not going to call it a negative, just an observation. But I did find that it was slightly padded out, this one. And maybe I'll talk to that when it comes to my dislikes. So what are the things that I didn't like in the novel? I would have to be that. I would have to say that this one felt a little bit padded out. It's a 576 page book. I can't recall how big Shards of Earth was. It didn't feel like it really dragged on, but I do feel it could have been edited and it could have definitely been at least 100 pages shorter, because I enjoyed it. I thought the pacing was good, but I thought there was a little bit too much repetition there at times. And not so much because he's backfilling you from the first novel, but stuff that we'd already learned in this novel itself, right? So I thought it suffered a little bit of, I need to have a big chunky book, as opposed to I just need to tell this really wonderful story. So look, that would be one of the things I would call out as a dislike. I would also have to say that this one suffered from that middle child complex, right? Being the second novel in a trilogy. I felt the plot is interesting, but I don't think it had a whole lot of revelations that I would sort of say let me down a little. I was hoping to get just a little bit more insights. I was expecting to have some kind of conflict here, being the second novel, to build up to some kind of resolution rather. But I just found that the plot sort of, there wasn't a whole lot of stuff that we really learnt. Look, I'll forgive it being the second novel, but I would have to say again, just as a minor nitpick, that I think this one also suffered a little from that middle child syndrome, where I just have to have a trilogy, because honestly, perhaps this one could have been done in 2 books. So what about recommendations? Can I still recommend this? I would say 100% yes. Like, if you like your modern space operas, the likes of Alistair Reynolds, Arkady Martin, Zixian Liu, I can never pronounce that name properly. I mean, your modern space operas, Neil Asher, I've got a couple behind me that I want to get to as well. Look, I would say have a go, right? Adrian Tchaikovsky is a great writer, especially if you liked his Children of Time trilogy. I've heard so many good things about Children of Time. I've yet to read it, and I'm so looking forward to reading it, because this is really good. And I can only say that, look, if you enjoy Children of Time, I suspect you're going to like this one as well. It might not be at the same caliber, I'm not quite sure, I can't make that personal assessment, but I will still say have a go at this. It's definitely got a whole lot of really good stuff in it that should whet your appetite. I would say definitely if you enjoyed Shards of Earth, I would say have a go, complete the trilogy, at least finish the second novel. I haven't yet to finish the trilogy myself, but I'd say I've read enough here to confirmed for me at least that it is definitely a worthwhile trilogy, and you're going to be reading 1,500 odd pages by the end of it, which is a commitment, right? But I think it is worthwhile. So I'd highly recommend it. I think you will enjoy it. So when it comes to rankings, look, this one I would have to say, I think I gave the Shards of Earth a 4 out of 5 on Goodreads. It was a very enjoyable read. I may have even have given it a slightly higher ranking. This one I would have to say, look, it's almost there as well. I would have to say just like 3.8, right, instead of 4. Still a very enjoyable novel, and it definitely did not deter me from reading the final and last installment of this great trilogy. So there you have it. Have you read it? Have you finished the trilogy? Would you say that it gets better from the second? I'm hoping it does, because I think it's got all the hallmarks of what will make a great trilogy. But I've yet to read the first. I'm looking forward to that. Have you read any other Tchaikovsky? I know of Children of Time. I've actually got the audio book, so I'll be reviewing that in sometime in the future. So I'm looking forward to that. But what are your preferences? Do you prefer this over the final architecture, that is, over the Children of Time? Do you recommend any other Adrian Tchaikovsky's? Is this not for your liking at all and you completely did not finish? I would love to hear your comments, because that's how I'll learn and grow, by listening to and reading your comments. So thank you again, and I hope to see you next time in the shed.